If you're like me, you like to make your life easier, in which case, allow me to share some of my tricks with you. Late night stakeouts so the sock fairy can't split up my pairs of socks, keeping my keys where I can't ever lose them, and I know what you're thinking, I already do that stuff. Give me something new. Well, try this one on for size. A solution to getting ripped off by enjoying it instead. I mean, I used to hate vegetables as a kid, now I love them, so why not getting ripped off? Just think how much easier life could be if you enjoyed getting ripped off. No more buyer's remorse or looking for deals, just buy it, baby. Check out this never used Game Boy Pocket I bought. I love it. There is one problem with going on a getting ripped off spree though. You run out of money pretty quick. Darn. Really thought I'd broken some new ground there, but as it turns out, people generally don't enjoy getting ripped off. At the top of that list, we have people who play video games. And looking throughout gaming's history, there's been blunder after blunder. Taking a quick skip through the console graveyard, number one cause of death, people thought the console was overpriced. And no good games right there with it, a deadly combination. Now, before I go any further as I delve into the topic of what video games should cost, including consoles and games by the way, I want to make something very clear. I am not a qualified financial expert, business strategist, or economist, and have no intentions of pretending to be. I wouldn't pretend to be your surgeon either. However, the one title I do rightfully have, and that is very relevant to this topic, is a consumer, which how the consumer feels is part of the equation. No matter how smart or stupid I might be, it's up to these video game companies to convince me to buy their products. Their success depends on it. Quick little story for you. When I was a kid, I chose to get this plastic horseshoe set instead of Star Fox 64, and Shigeru Miyamoto had to go to bed that night with that being a reality he could do nothing about. And nothing against horseshoes, but come on, kid version of me, do a barrel roll. Point is that these companies are stuck with us consumers. No matter how much schooling, fancy degrees, impressive careers, or market research the people at these companies may have or do, they are beholden to our behavior, like it or not. They can tell us something is worth it all they want, but we, the consumer, always get the final say based on if we buy it, though we do need to navigate the fact that we love a lot of this stuff. People can discuss various factors like inflation, wages, how our grandparents' generation bought small mansions from careers in delivering bread, but I've found that if people are passionate about something, regardless of pretty much any and all other factors, a lot of times they'll find a way to buy it anyways. Not always, of course, but it happens a lot. And I'm not saying that's necessarily fair or how things should be, but that's just how it is. A more light-hearted example, but I remember as an older kid counting the exact number of lawns I needed to mow months ahead of the GameCube launch and making sure I didn't spend a penny on anything else. That was a choice though. We the consumers do still have the power. What matters is, do we buy this stuff and how much of it? If we don't buy it, sales will suffer and the performance of these companies will also suffer, and sometimes force adjustments to be made. Lots of infamous examples throughout gaming's history of companies getting pricing wrong and paying the price for it. Ironic, ain't it? Seems like every major player in the video game industry has done it too. The Sega Saturn infamously launched for $100 more than the first PlayStation, where then president of PlayStation North America Steve Race didn't have to say much.
$2.99.
The price heard round the world, as some like to call it. You could argue that right there cemented the birth of PlayStation as a major player by announcing a price. Not that they wouldn't eventually make their own pricing mistake with the PS3, with the price of $599 still being a triggering phrase for gamers that is synonymous with crazy expensive consoles. Though, to Sony's credit, the PS3 did eventually turn things around with some rebranding and a much lower price. Next, it was Nintendo's turn to mess up by charging $250 for the 3DS, and after poor initial sales, then lowering it all the way to $170. And when Microsoft had their opportunity to screw up the pricing, they made the most of it as well with the launch of the Xbox One, which the beauty of playing Ori on it can help me forget temporarily, but the launch of the Xbox One was a disaster. Fans were mostly upset at the DRM restrictions, essentially checks that required an online connection and made game lending more difficult. But even though they reversed all of that before launch, the price was still a huge turnoff for people. Charging $100 more than the PS4 and justifying it by forcing the Xbox Connect on you that was bundled with it, yeah, that didn't work. Some people feel like the Xbox brand never recovered from their botched launch of the Xbox One. Sega definitely didn't recover from their botched launch of the Saturn, at least not as a home console maker. Quick moment of silence for the Dreamcast. Dreamcast was always going to be bitter about having to fight an uphill battle due to how poor of a financial situation Sega was in before it even launched. It told me this in therapy. In any case, moral of the story, getting pricing wrong really messes with these companies. Again, when we choose to not pay the prices being asked, to make more money, sometimes you gotta charge less. Not too little, obviously, as it might diminish the perceived value, maybe even signal some red flags. I remember this place called Taco Bravo when I was growing up that would advertise 29-cent burritos. Sounded like a diarrhea attack waiting to happen to me. As obsessed as we consumers are with saving money and getting good deals, we're not against paying more if we think it's worth it. It's all about hitting that sweet spot of perceived fair value that is beneficial for both the seller and buyer without going over. You gotta Goldilocks it. Not too hot, not too cold, but just right. I mean, sure, would a lower price have turned the Tiger Telematics Gizmondo into a Game Boy killer? Probably not. Certain consoles are just destined to fail for other reasons, most notably game library, but price will always be a deal breaker if you get it wrong. And my answer for what video games should cost, consoles and games, is the Goldilocks price, which works out best for everyone, by the way. More people can afford to buy the console as well as a game, and then be more likely to buy more games on top of that. And the companies sell more consoles and copies of various games as a result. Everyone wins, and every console that's ever been super successful has more or less done this. And as a consumer, as much as I obviously care about the price I have to pay, I do care about video game companies doing well, at least if it's a company I like. I ship care packages to Sega filled with vitamin C packets. You can never have enough of these on hand. They've saved me from getting sick countless times. But I want to see game companies that I like do well for very simple and, let's be honest, selfish reasons. I want them to keep making video games for me to enjoy, and for everyone else to enjoy as well. I like to celebrate video games on this channel, and that's hard to do if nobody buys or plays them. All we need for that to happen is game companies to charge prices that us consumers are willing to pay, while also allowing them to be successful businesses. So charge enough, but not too much. Goldilocks it. If you write a letter to one of these companies, this is what you want to be sending. As far as what that exact Goldilocks price is, I'm not going to pretend to know exactly what these companies need to prosper. That's for the long-tenured economists and business folks to figure out. Remember, I'm just a consumer, though I do fancy myself a banana expert. Did you know that nanners will naturally split apart into 3 sections? Which is useful for telling somebody something they didn't know about nanners, but not much else. Of course, part of the equation for what video games should cost also depends on what you're getting. In most cases, we're assuming it's a video game that you want. You couldn't sell me Life of Black Tiger for 10 cents. Or, at the very least, a video game that you want because you're hoping it will be good. By the way, just a reminder to actually play the games you buy, otherwise you can definitely make a case for being ripped off. Anyhow, something I hear a lot of people saying that I couldn't agree with more is for games to feel complete when you buy them. Especially for those of us who prefer to purchase physical copies of our games, it's annoying to have extra content added later via downloads, because then it's like, well, I own the game physically, but just some of it. Though it does depend what gets added. Not having Luigi's Balloon World on my Mario Odyssey cart doesn't keep me up at night. I'm usually okay with certain DLC so long as the base game still feels like a complete game and stands on its own. Although shout out to those special later released editions that stick it all on one release. People will talk about length of a game too, but I've always preferred quality first and foremost, whether the game happens to be short or long, or kinda short or kinda long. Really good short games I tend to want to play again anyways. When it comes to the cost of older games, that's where it really gets tricky, at least if we're talking about physical copies, because then you're introducing collecting into the equation. But if we're talking about the cost of older games on more modern hardware, it's much more simple and generally tends to be prices that make us happy, in large part due to them often coming in compilations where you get a bunch of games all in one release. What's more common is for us to complain that there aren't more older games made available, specifically certain games we've been yearning for. If Cadillacs and Dinosaurs doesn't get released in the next 10 seconds, I'm gonna scream. Sometimes I do worry that the low prices of older games makes people think less of them, specifically the younger generations, but ultimately them costing less creates a higher chance of people actually buying and playing them, so I'm okay with it. But there we have it, my thoughts on what video games should cost. Goldilocks it. There's been countless examples throughout gaming's history of pricing for consoles and games that have more or less been able to hit the sweet spot in the middle so that companies can thrive and consumers can enjoy this hobby that we are all so passionate about.
He's the retro bird, yeah, and he's talking about video games. He's the retro bird.